Welcome to The Weekend. I'm Eugene Daniels, along with Jonathan Capehart and Jackie Alamany. We begin this morning with major breaking news out of Washington, D.C. A suspect is now in custody following gunfire at the Washington Hilton, where the White House Correspondents' Dinner was being held last night. It was a chaotic scene inside the ballroom. Thousands of guests hid under tables as Secret Service agents with guns drawn yelled shots fired. President Trump, the First Lady, and other administration officials were rushed off the stage and out of the room and safely evacuated. Police say the suspect charged at a Secret Service checkpoint in the hotel's lobby, armed with multiple weapons. The president confirmed a Secret Service agent was struck in his bulletproof vest and was taken to a local hospital and stabilized. Trump posted a photo of the suspect. Sources say he is identified as Cole Allen, a 31-year-old from Torrance, California. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro said the suspect will be arraigned on Monday in federal court and is being charged with 2 counts of using a firearm during a crime of violence and a second crime of assault on a federal officer. Here's President Trump last night describing the hearing situation when he got back to the White House last night.
That was very unexpected, but incredibly acted upon by Secret Service and law enforcement. And this was an event dedicated to freedom of speech that was supposed to bring together members of both parties with members of the press. And in a certain way it did, because the fact that they just unified, I saw a room that was just totally unified. It was in one way a very beautiful thing to see. A man charged a security checkpoint armed with multiple weapons, and he was taken down by some very brave members of Secret Service, and they acted very quickly.
Joining us now, 4 of our MS Now colleagues: White House reporter Jake Traylor, Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delaney, reporter Julia Jester, and legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning as we try to dig into what happened last night. Ken, I want to start with you. We were at the same table last night when this all went down. It hasn't even been 12 hours, but what do we know about the investigation, the suspect, and what the investigators are looking at as far as motive here?
Eugene, good morning. There have been some developments overnight. The suspect is Cole Thomas Allen, age 31, of Torrance, California. As we were going to bed last night, FBI agents were poring over his residence in Torrance looking for clues about motive and about connections. And here's what we know about what he did, allegedly. He was armed, authorities say, with a shotgun, a handgun, and knives. And he had booked a room at the hotel, at the Hilton Hotel, where the event was taking place. And as you guys know, because you were all there, there is no security perimeter outside the hotel, or at least not a firm one. The security perimeter was around the ballroom below ground. And what he did was he charged that security perimeter, those magnetometers, after we were all in the ballroom eating our first course. The president was seated. The national anthem had been played. And so the screening was essentially over. The security officers were milling around. We can see on video he charges through the first line of defense. The security officers, Secret Service and others, get into a crouching position, begin firing shots. We don't see on the video, but apparently he was tackled and subdued and never hit by gunfire, according to authorities. Now, they are investigating whether he actually got off any shots. And I've seen witness interviews with people overnight who swore that they saw him shooting, that they saw him assembling a weapon and then running and shooting. And so I think ballistics will determine whether he actually got off a shot and whether he hit anyone. But either way, he was subdued before he got to the ballroom. And so this is raising a host of questions about how this could have happened, the security at the event, whether things need to change. And obviously, after he was subdued, none of us in the ballroom knew that the danger was over. And so what we witnessed was this chaotic scene of Secret Service agents and others, the counter assault squad, with heavy weapons rushing in, evacuating the VIPs, evacuating the president, the vice president, members of the cabinet. You know that Kash Patel, the FBI director, was one table over from us. We watched as his detail was waving their arms to try to get the attention of the Secret Service agents. Eventually, he was walked out of there. Members of Congress were leaving. It was a terrifying and chaotic scene and a traumatic scene, because it was 1 second we were laughing and enjoying the evening, and the next second it was gunfire, chaos, and trauma. So a lot left to be learned about what the motive was. But this guy was well educated, from what we know. He, according to his LinkedIn page, graduated from Caltech, one of the most prestigious STEM universities in the country. He was working as a teacher, but he had a master's degree in computer science. And we do not know at this moment exactly what his motives were, guys.
Jake, I'd love to go to you at the White House. We obviously heard from President Trump last night after he was whisked away from the ballroom and brought along his White House press corps. He was accompanied in the briefing room by the First Lady, along with other members of the cabinet who were also present at the dinner and were similarly eventually brought out of the room by Secret Service agents, by their appropriate details. What was the takeaway from the president's comments last night, and are we learning anything new this morning on the White House grounds?
Yeah, Jackie, good morning to you guys. It seems as though the president last night very much wanted to be in front of the camera to address the nation and to address people as quickly as possible. And this is honestly quite reminiscent of the first assassination attempt on his life in Butler, where any readout we were getting from inside then the campaign, as the president was running for re-election, was similarly that he wants to address the nation as quickly as possible. That seemed to be the case last night. In terms of the president's schedule today, we received a Thursday notice from the White House of the president's schedule that basically from 8 o'clock this morning throughout the day he would participate in what is referred to as executive time here at the White House, potentially in the Oval Office. At the moment, we've received no update to that, meaning as of now, we expect for the president to remain on the premise here of the White House today. I will say, you know, this being now the third known attempt on the president's life, and also just in the past just couple of years, as we were exchanging as much information last night as possible with White House officials, trying to understand, you know, how the president is thinking about this, how his top aides are thinking about this. Kind of a key theme or takeaway that I had, at least, was that these are moments where President Trump, I think, realizes the political gravitas and the moment of it. And of course, obviously, as soon as it was known that everyone was safe, I had a couple White House officials texting me saying the president is not arguing, but he is trying as much as he possibly can to get back on that stage. He wants to address the nation as quickly as possible. When Secret Service detail told him, you know, that was they weren't able to secure that area for obvious reasons, it was then the president's idea to get over to the White House as quickly as possible and deliver it from there. So I say all that to say, I would be unsurprised if in the aftermath of this is some form of potential political leverage. The president, I think, still continues to want to get out in front of this thing. We don't yet know if there's any type of event today. I'd likely imagine that very much depends upon what information comes out, if new charges are presented to the suspect here. But as of now, the president is to reside at the White House. I very much imagine we will hear from the president on Truth Social at some point this morning as more information comes.
All right, thank you for that report, Jake. Fallon Gallagher, let me bring you in here. And just to be clear, we don't know officially if the president was the specific target of what happened at the Washington Hilton last night. But as Jake pointed out, he raised the question of new charges being brought against the alleged the person alleged to have been a part of what happened last night. Talk about the charges that Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche announced from the briefing room last night, and then what potential other charges, the new charges that could come down that Jake pointed out there.
Yeah, last night in the briefing room, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said that there could be a wide range of charges here. And we saw Judge Jeanine Pirro, who's the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, where he'll face those charges, announce two in particular. And that is assault using a firearm during a crime of violence and assault on a federal officer using a dangerous weapon. But she made it very clear that it's likely not to end there. She kept the door open for additional charges charges. She was specifically asked about possible terrorism charges and said that we're very early in the investigation, which to me signals that we will likely see many more charges to come. At this point, though, we have very little information about what federal investigators know and how they're painting the picture of these charges. We know that one case was filed in D.C. federal court overnight, one criminal case, but that case is filed under seal. So we would imagine that it was probably a case involving Allen, this suspect who we have here at this point, but it's filed under seal. So we don't know his name. I would imagine that no other cases were filed overnight. But it's Sunday now, so they'll continue to investigate this. They'll likely add more charges. But what's really important here is that at this point, anything that would be filed in federal court is just a criminal complaint. So they'll eventually seat a grand jury and produce some sort of an indictment, presumably towards this suspect. But the other big thing that we learned from Judge Jeanine Pirro last night in that press conference is that he will definitively be arraigned Monday. Now, we don't know what time, but that is a very fast turnaround for a case that is still under seal and filed very late overnight from Saturday into Sunday to then have that suspect in federal court, presumably Monday morning, pleading guilty or not guilty to those charges.
Julia, just I want to bring you in here. When you are talking to your sources, whether it was overnight or maybe even early this morning, what are they telling you about how Secret Service, the other law enforcement agencies were there, are looking at the security situation there and how something like this was even able to happen?
Well, Eugene, I was here right behind me, the entrance to the Hilton, where you go right into the red carpet. We were there set up ahead of the dinner, and I want to note that I spoke with probably half a dozen cabinet officials in the hours leading up to this shooting. The president himself may not have been on that red carpet, but Secretary Rubio, Secretary Mullen, Secretary Hegseth, the list goes on, and that area is an area that is not within that magnometer security perimeter. I took note as I arrived yesterday that I was able to go downstairs and show my press credential and enter with a bag. No one checked my bag to be in that area. Now, I was upstairs moments before the shooting, and somebody blocked me from going down the steps that I had just ascended. And so I just went right down the elevator. And when I stepped off, law enforcement agents were running around. But again, it was not blocked off. So there will be a lot of questions about the security posture for an event like this. I've been covering the red carpet for a few years now, and just a couple of years ago, there was a pro-Palestinian protester who was detained by Secret Service for infiltrating that red carpet area. So it has happened before. Thankfully, in that instance, there was no weapon or threat of violence. But in this case, it could have been a lot worse, given the open nature of that area surrounding the ballroom. Now, law enforcement, when this incident occurred, took swift action. It started and was essentially over within minutes, but you see the shaken members of this administration and members of Congress. You saw the videos of them getting escorted out of the ballroom, and so it was an incredibly tense situation last night. We were all ducking down, crouching down, and then Secret Service came out and said, everybody out, this is an active crime scene, and we'll see kind of what the changes in the security moving forward. This is a hotel that has guests who are staying here. Authorities said that the suspect himself was a guest. There are a lot of parties happening in the lobby area. There was a lot of free-flowing movement between that upstairs and downstairs area. And so I think a lot of us are really shaken this morning and grateful to law enforcement that a scary night did not get way, way worse. Eugene.